answering the question as to my opinion on the situation involving Ukraine apparently assassinating a Russian general in Moscow is, well, frankly, this is, I haven't read all the material that's out there, and it's extensive. The war started with Russia basically committing enormous civil rights. I have images. I was looking at these children, small towns, whole families, just mostly children, even one parent, multiple kids, repeatedly throughout these little town areas. And they're murdered. They're tied up and they're murdered. And they have waffle irons that were used on their body and their face, all over their face. Horrible, horrible, painful way to die. We're talking serious international law violations. And, I don't have much time, but off the top of my head, from what I do seem to know of the fragments, indicating that clearly there was a problem with apparent usages of gas by the Russians against Ukrainian troops, in which basically international law bans those type of chemicals from being used in warfare. And I want you to keep in mind that you're talking about the gas that the Russians were apparently using was being utilized inside Ukrainian territory. This is very important. In other words, they were using it on somebody else's home ground. Had it been a reverse situation, it's a little bit different. If you were trying to repel people from your home ground and you were using this type of irritant gas material, I believe it's artillery delivered. Now, the thing is what there does seem to be information that indicates, apparently, that there was an ongoing investigation. Eventually, it was called for a trial meeting. There was a trial meeting as to how to deal with it. It was apparently determined that this was clearly an international law violation. It's, basically. So this violates international law, rules of warfare, all this stuff. And it would appear as though when I look at it, I don't see any usages of gas by the Ukrainians. So I think it's abundantly clear that they're sending a message that the apparent person in charge of giving the actual order to use the gas is the one being held apparently accountable. And that clearly Ukraine is saying that they don't want the war to escalate utilizing certain types of substances, gases that would be in violation of international law. So to me, I see a very strong signal, although we have parties that are condemning the style of response. And again, we're all in apparent territory here. We haven't exactly had confirmations. But, theoretically, when you look at the number of violations and you see that there's literally daily listings of there can be no doubt, because they keep repeating again and again and again, intentional targeting of civilians. And, they're terror-style attacks. These don't compare to the desperation of the end of World War II, where finally at the end of World War II, the decision was made to bomb civilians in cities, basically because if they dropped bombs on the factories, the tin would blow off, the machine would get tipped over, and in 24 to 72 hours, they would tip the machine back over and be running again, making munitions. So the decision was to kill the factory workers who lived nearby in Germany. And that, of course, because you had the stick house situation, that led to huge fires. And with Japan, Japan was a nightmare. You had fire bombs used. The lifestyle of people in Japan have lots of wood, lots of paper usages on their houses. It's a very tropical area. It's not what you would call, you know, something where you need heavy fortified stuff to protect you from snow. So the sadness of this stuff is just like kindling. It just firestorm. It just went right through the cities, and people had no structures overnight. 90,000 people were homeless overnight. And, this would seem to be quite a horrible thing. But many people did see it coming. It's like, you get out of the way and it's like, wow, what are you going to do? So, but yes, this did happen. And this was in the resolve of what was a bad situation in an effort to save at least 250,000 U.S. troops on the invasion sequence, and untold number of lives when you figure out all the territory that was being held, well, for instance, in China, and how many people were under repression and how many people were in camps or incarcerated. So you're talking a human rights item where the balance of all these people's lives in China that were, imprisoned, so the justification to shorten the war definitely had a logic to it. Germany, there also was a logic to stop the German machine from going, because they had huge underground factories. They were turning out, believe it or not, they were still turning out jet fighters, advanced fighters, and building advanced technologies. They were moving forward. Nonetheless, they were still moving forward. They just didn't want to quit, even though they were vastly outnumbered. I mean, they could put 150 jets in the sky each day, and it wasn't going to matter because they were being confronted by 1,200 prop aircraft. So they didn't last very long, But the danger of other types of weapons being utilized and other human rights violations had already become clearer and clearer as you had city after city and camp after camp basically being liberated, and you find the horror of mass graves and the condition of these people that were starving to death. So as the word would come through that the Allies would discover this stuff, there was basically the decision of what do we do with this, and says, well, we have to make these people turn this all off. They have to stop this. There's too many lives at stake. Every day you have this vast number of civilians that are dying and starving to death. This has to be ended so we can start just bringing in the food instead of fighting anymore. So there were major human rights considerations for when the Allies did bomb civilian targets. But again, they were associated with manufacturing directly to weapons in virtually every instance that I saw. Even though the fires would spread elsewhere, that's certainly what happened in Japan. But here today, again, the Ukraine's not using gas warfare of a nature that is banned by international law. So, to me, it's pretty clear. They're sending a signal. You can't keep doing this. Okay, it's still not working. Perhaps it's a personalized signal. Again, apparently, a decision for a personalized signal that if you give the order for planes to be loaded with that material, aircraft to be loaded, and you send them on their way and give them targeting information, you're the one who gives the orders, they're going to come after you and hold you responsible. And so, again, I mean, to me, this is extreme restraint. Extreme restraint. You can go on the web and look up yourself the vast numbers of human rights violations that have occurred in Ukraine, done by the Russian forces. It's just a staggering numbers, staggering. So, I mean, I have to say that the resolve of the Ukrainian people is still very, very patient, and that they're very, very committed, and they're never going to stop. They're going to get every inch of land back. Of course, that's what the border agreement is that they signed with multiple nations, including the United States, to disarm all of their nuclear weapons. I mean, that's 4,800 nuclear weapons. Incredible act of humanity to say we don't want to be part of a nuclear proliferation, and people should follow in our footsteps and reduce the signature of nuclear threat and trust. And here's the thing. That's what the agreement was about. And trust fewer nations to manage certain systems and to assist in protecting them. That's what that agreement was about. That's what those feet forward were about. Let's lessen the chance of nuclear war. Let's work with people the best that we can and give every other possible option before it has to go that way. Unfortunately, as the Ukrainians, they did not have money. When I reviewed the basically, the disassembly of the nuclear weapons, it was done in stages. There was money repeatedly filed for. There was assistance that came from multiple nations. There were multiple nations having inspectors going through, all the processes of this to basically, disarm this equipment, these missiles, and convert everything for peaceful energy production. And they'd keep running out of money, and there'd be delays. And as the war started, I don't think many people kept track with where the things were. Roughly the indications from the budget, if you graph them out and you scale everything out, it's easy to see. You got around 800 warheads that were never defueled. You have the separation of the warheads from the rockets. You have the defueling of the rockets, remove the rocket fuel. You have the disarming of rockets, or the disassembly, or you remove certain key components, you send it to a museum. In other words, you render it safe, you remove certain key components, it's not operable, and nobody's just going to come along and put a couple nuts and bolts and make it work again. These are custom parts. These are custom parts, and you'd have to really know what you're doing to try to put something back together. So this is a dangerous situation, and I don't think people are well read enough to understand that, by my count on research, what seemed to be clearly talked about and made public internationally on the schedule for disarmament clearly indicates 800 warheads were not defueled. So they were separated from rockets. The rockets were all separated. No more rockets. But when it came down to removing all the materials and taking all of the warheads apart, this is a process. It takes a while, so to 4,800 nuclear weapons, and you had support weapons, you had new parts, service parts, all this, all the chain of what is a support system for 4,800 nuclear weapons, so 800 warheads exist still. So it would seem apparently that rumors are being put out that a missile was reassembled with a nuclear warhead. There was an article on that. There were some other sprinklings of articles of not what you would call confirmed, but not exactly denied the right way. So the rumor is, as of the beginning of last month, that 5 nuclear warheads were restored to missiles. And of course, you can set timers on any of these warheads, put them on board an aircraft, put them in, all these different ways that you can. They're very small, actually, and you can send them on their way. So the insanity to allow this war to continue is just so dangerous. It's just dumb land. And the Ukrainians have every right to be restored every inch of their territory, every inch, and to get fair compensation for what's been done to them. I mean, these what they do, waffle irons Here's an 8-year-old kid, a 5-year-old kid, a 12-year-old kid seriously burned by a waffle iron before they murdered him. I mean, this is horror. This is horrible. You can look a lot of this stuff up on the web. It's there. So it's a situation. My view is that it would seem obvious that the Russians were way outside the box, committing numerous international violations, way, 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 way outside the box, many, many times over. So I can't condemn and say that a decision to say we're going to hold one person giving the orders who's violating intentionally international law, whether that's a bad decision. That's an independent decision. I would have to say that I definitely can't condemn it. Considering what's there, because it's not like they're matching. They're not matching using chemical weapons. They're trying to defuse the situation. They're staying within the certain box and window of allowable types of weapons. They certainly need more. I mean, in my view, we need to triple the U.S. Military support with custom items, and that's a backroom deal. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to give them lots of more expensive systems. It means exactly the word that I'm saying: custom, designed, built. There's a lot of ways you can do things. Custom can mean a wide array of things. As simple as aircraft, prop aircraft. Prop aircraft are proving to be quite successful. There's not enough anti-aircraft systems that the Russians have in the region. So, if you flood the area with a lot of prop aircraft, a lot of them would survive. It might be kind of like a D-Day, but it's possible and survivable. And these are decisions that would have to be made by Ukraine. Obviously, getting aircraft to fly long range. These are not hard things to do. I've studied electronics my whole life, and electronics can be very simple. More elaborate electronics, more expensive, safer, but you can do a lot. So it's one of those things where there's too many people dying, good people dying in Ukraine, too many people. And I think we need to up the priority of seriousness and triple the support going in to Ukraine. And I do mean custom. I mean, you have to read what the modern situation is and say, well, actually, we've got some stuff that's not necessarily always considered the cutting-edge, expensive, ultra-tech thing. But guess what? It works. It's effective. And that's what you need to discuss with the experts in the back rooms, and you need to work with those tactical tables. Get your people that have, 20, 30, 40 years experience, and collectively they have millions of years experience, and you sit there and you let them work it out. You work with them, you explore areas. Maybe you come up with a few ideas if you're lucky. They'll look at it. They'll read it out. They'll tell you what the situation is. You got numbers on all of that. This is where this needs to go. We need to figure out, truthfully, that we have watched a horror story of people who are incredibly committed to freedom, and we have to triple our support and give them a chance to get, yet again, a little better bang out of the buck to try to save more lives. Try to get that ratio of life loss where they lose less lives. We need to do this. We definitely need to do this. It's the right thing to do. We're obligated by treaty. We can't violate the treaty. It's upsetting to me to hear people talk about, well, let's just back out of this. It doesn't work that way. there's multiple nations signing on the treaty. This is a multi-nation treaty. It wouldn't just be a violation between two countries. It would be a violation between multiple countries. Basically, most all the allied forces. You just can't do that. You can't say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and protect you, and then say, nah, it's not convenient anymore, we're out of this. You can't do that. It's not a standard business decision. These are people's lives. These are children's lives. This is a situation with horrible international crimes committed. You can't back out of this. So that's my answer to the questions incoming as to my opinion, to the best of what I have both time for and material that I've accessed for understanding. I believe it's the right direction. So maybe I'm not agreeing with the administration exactly, but I think that I'm in a valid decision territory, and that it's something to be tactically discussed. So I'm going to stick to that. Again, thank you for your time, Michael Crosby.